Hi.
How are you doing?
Fun.
Good to hear it. My name's Kenneth. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm the curator and host of Poetry at the Point. We have a really special edition of our reading series today. We have some poets from near and far from Perugia Press, all label mates on that particular press, and I'm really excited to be with them and to be with you this evening. Before we get started, you know what? That's a lie. I'm going to start us off with a poem, as I have been doing for the last few months, because I really like doing it that way. Is that okay with you?
Woo-hoo!
So it's National Poetry Month, as you may or may not know. Shout out National Poetry Month. And I figure National Poetry Month is a good time, as good a time as any to read your favorite poems, right? So when quick story, I think I was a freshman or sophomore in high school at a very ridiculous private all-boys school in Nashville, Tennessee. And our teacher had this project where he would just assign you a poem. You didn't get to choose. He gave you a poem that you then had to get up and talk about at length in front of your classmates, which was very, very nerve-wracking, as you can imagine. And we had never done this before. And he assigned me Shakespeare's 116th sonnet. And I knew very little. I had read like a couple, maybe Shakespeare plays, didn't really know much about the sonnets at all. And to this day, I could not, if you ask me, recite any of this off the top of the head. But I've had dreams about this poem, where like entire lines will appear like on the wall or something like that, right? So this poem is very, very deep in my gut. So, let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error, and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. Super cocky, right? I love it. Okay, shout outs as we begin to our members of the St. Louis Poetry Center. I'm assuming that a banner is appearing magically on the screen of our live stream right now. You can become a member today if you haven't already at our website, stlouispoetrycenter.org. Aaron also has a QR code in the back. Make it easy breezy, set it up, and forget about it. Shout out always to the Missouri Arts Council and the Regional Arts Commission who support this programming and other programming that we have, and shout out to the Focal Point. I also want to just note, because we will be taking lots of pictures, you've probably already noticed, we do have, should you choose, an opt-out media release. If you don't want us to put your likeness on social media, want to make sure you have that option. Okay, a couple of events coming up on the 25th, which is 2 days from now, at Wild Fruit Projects. Our friends Jill Ferns and Gray Wild are going to be reading. I believe Jill read here last year or the year before. So that is on Virginia. Look that up on Facebook. Also on the 29th at 7 p.m. at the High-Low, we have a reading that we are doing in collaboration with the Kransberg Arts Foundation and our friends over at Left Bank Books. That will be with Hadara Barnadav and Asha Futterman. Should be a fantastic reading. Very excited about that. Okay, quick housekeeping. If you are here in person, bathrooms are out that way. Take a left, a left and then a right. There are, I don't remember which one was which. There are gender inclusive and single gender restrooms if you like that. We have lots of stuff in the back. All of our poets have books for sale. We also have a Perugia Press anthology for sale. I believe they are $10 if I'm not mistaken. And the title is Brilliance Spilling. Absolutely would love to support Perugia Press in that way. A couple of the poets also have postcards for you to take with you as well to spread the good word about their work. And what am I missing? Oh, we have a friend in the crowd today, Christina Fales, wanted me to announce that she is starting a writing group. She's been coming to several of these. So if you are interested in getting together with poets and talking about work, please see her before you leave. She'll get your info. Would love to kind of support local community poetry that way. So thanks. If you are watching this on the internet, I'm very glad that you're here on the Facebooks or the YouTubes. Comment, ask questions. To that point, we've left lots of time at the end of our time together this evening to have some conversation with these poets. So you here live at the focal point, as those questions pop into your brain, jot them down, make a note of them, because we want to entertain those as well as the questions that we have prepared as well. Can you tell that I'm nervous? I'm like so psyched about this. All right, let's see. Aaron Quick is texting me, which must mean something. So obviously, I'm going to begin by strongly shouting out Perugia Press. This whole thing just started out as an idea that Melody and I had kind of over conversation, and it's turned into a real thing. Perugia has been fantastic at communicating and marketing about this event, getting you here in your seat live in person for a poetry reading in the real world on a Tuesday evening. We don't take that for granted. They help support the poets get here. So we just want to make sure and shout out them big time. So thank you. All right, I think that's it. Is that everything, Aaron? We sure? No apologies. All right, Catherine Anderson, our first poet this evening's most recent book is a memoir, My Brother Speaks in Dreams, of Family, Beauty, and Belonging. She has published 4 collections of poetry, including Everyone I Love Immortal, Woman with a Gambling Mania, The Work of Hands, and In the Mother Tongue. She has received awards in poetry from the Massachusetts Artist Foundation, in parentheses, many years ago, she says, and more recently, the I-70 Review and the Crab Orchard Review. She lives in Kansas City, Missouri, where she works with new immigrants and refugees. Please welcome Catherine Anderson.
So wonderful to see you all. Thank you for coming out. And thank you, Kenneth. Thank you, Melody. Thank you, Aaron, for making this possible. It's just really terrific to be here at the focal point and be with you. What I thought I'd do is read, first of all, from my Perugia book, The Work of Hands, and then I'll read a little bit from My Brother Speaks in Dreams and one newer poem that kind of connects. I've been thinking a lot lately about, oh my gosh, 45 years of work that I'm now trimming down. And most of that work has been spent in anti-poverty organizations, working primarily with new immigrants and new refugees. A lot of it in Boston, but also the last 20 years, kind of I've been in Kansas City, working with interpreters. So I've had a lot of time to really think about what is going on in this country. And these 2 poems I'm going to read you, I wrote many, many years ago, but I think they still dramatize many issues that have been left neglected in our country. And it's just kind of a reckoning that I'm always giving myself and trying to take into consideration, what we're overlooking in history. This first poem relates to the place where I grew up, which is southeastern Michigan, and it refers to a part of that area of the Clinton River, really, where originally the Ojibwa or the Chippewa Native Americans lived. Also within that area were the Fox, Iroquois, Ottawas, Potawatomis, and Sioux. But for this poem, I'm referring just to the Chippewa and Huron. It's called Strange and Beautiful Heart. I once ate in a restaurant with the gold brown faces of warriors, all dead, lining the walls. Little Raven, Lone Wolf, Red Cloud. Our meat was tangy, soaked in oil and tarragon. We raised our glasses to our friends, the newlywed man and woman. I must have drifted then, following the photographs on the wall, imagining distance caught in the camera's slow shutter, the sepia-colored sky, in love with the rolling tan earth. But my reverie was a myth, too Christian and sweet, as if goodwill could cradle sorrow in its solid arms. As a child, I had dreamed of rowing down a river, stroked by Chippewa and Huron, I'd wanted to enter our country's strange and beautiful heart with my rapid oars. Then the river was a translucent path, and I had not yet failed at love. As a child, my plate was filled with brisket and corn, sugar peas, and warm bread. I ate it all and asked for more. Only years later could I see the land I had grown up beside, the low hills threaded by green, worked by generations of Moravians, and before them, the Chippewa who hunted under a canopy of willows edging a stream that slivered cautiously to the Great Lake. I had left home and was driving west, sighting those familiar dips in the horizon, what I always knew as the beginning of water, its loping beauty and memory for light. But then the road met the end of the land, turning again into more land, and not the river, nor the lake, nor the sea, and I was lost. I don't remember if we felt hungry that day we gathered to celebrate. Certainly not the burning, giddy hunger of people forced to scour the earth for something to eat. The photograph of Wounded Knee, Bigfoot frozen in the snows, wasn't on the walls, and neither was Running Face of the Mandan tribe, his skin dented by smallpox, 1810, 1837, 1844, the years of removal marked off. As if these old men would mar the sand-toned floor and clay dinnerware, as if we cared to remember these acts of death, the blurred gravure. The meal before us was resplendent, peppered fiddleheads, quail with grape dumplings. With my friends, I breathed in the fragrance of this food and ate it all. A story is told over and over again because it feels true on the tongue. As a child, I loved the land across the road, the wide hills not yet sold or divided, a white fence, a swing rope on a tree, and in winter, at dusk, blue fields of snow. Once, after school, I stole away to those hills, dragging my wood and metal sledge to the top, then sliding into the ice-tinged leaves and brown sticks of the bottom. In truth, that land was nothing more than a word and a story about land. But I would return if I could. I would come in winter, when the sky is a spare plain, and the earth still the earth. This next poem, whole different part of the world. I was working in Boston for many years in a low-income community program for women, and I was really trying to understand the origins and connections of poverty. We were all activists working together, and I discovered Kayla Kollwitz, the German activist who was an artist, an illustrator, a wood etchist, and a woodcutter, and a painter. She's also a social activist, and she was really documenting poverty between the two wars that took place in Berlin. And, well, that time period, and she was in Berlin. I was comparing it to my work in Boston. This is called Kayla Kollwitz, A Book of Pictures. Our cold, half-lit days and angled streets of smoke. Kayla Kollwitz would know the city where I live. Tired, scattered faces, the memory of last night's siren, the shrill wake of emergency. In the 19th century, all over Europe, poor people's homes were burning. Look at the jagged lines Kollwitz chose, her gold paper and black ink. Look at that lean figure of death, grinning in the shadows as he waits to eat. In my city, too, rooms are on fire. You can see charred doors and couch springs, shattered glass spilling on the street. You can hear a woman tell how she walks circles around her apartment every night, sniffing the air, shaking. How she dreams of falling walls and suffocation, her children lying on the tenement floor, a window shade tapping the empty frame. In this picture, a woman sits to rest, empty basket dropped to her side. One hand clutches her broadcloth knee, the other covers half her face in grief. All day she has worked, lifting iron and water, buckets of ash. In 1893, in the city of Berlin, she has found nothing to eat. The woman's sore hands fill the whole dark center of this picture. The church wall she leans against is drawn in spare lines, passing her on the street, fading as they travel. Here, a woman must search for work with her daughter, scarves knotted to her chins, legs wrapped in wool. Tomorrow they will bale hay or pull a plow, mother and daughter hitched, waist to shoulder. On a pocked road out of the city, they are walking apart. Bare trees throw rain, ice. The daughter's face is a white stroke of chalk, whiter than the sky. In this plate, Kollwitz does not show wind sharpening in the sky, but men's backs bent to the eating earth. They are oxen for a plow, guided by a woman whose black figure must crouch deep into the V handles and wide disc, cutting furrows. In the background, gray rising land, crooked rows spreading. A man's head curves against the horizon as he talks to the stumbling boy yoked with him. Their shoulders tilt to the left as they pull acres and acres off the page. Sometimes I close my eyes and don't look at her scenes at all, but run my hands over the soft pages, turning one after the other, feeling the flawless art paper, the book's delicate stitching down the spine. Kollwitz imagined pain so literally, she once drew a woman eating the blade of a scythe, and through 2 wars she drew our bodies blackening death tint. I don't know how she stared all night, sketching her bruised city that wouldn't heal. When I look at her fury and sadness in this last self-portrait, her grooved forehead and heavy, gazing eyes, I wish she could show me how to etch the city I see, how to prepare a copper plate with black soot, holding the frame until it glows orange, the metal set for my sharp knife. Thank you. I just have a few more. I'm going to start with a poem that actually appeared first in the Work of Hands, and then many years later, 18 years later, if I'm truthful, I reconstructed it and turned it into a prose poem and included in the memoir that came out last year in 2022, year before last. And this one is about, really, my brother Charlie, the subject of the memoir, who had autism, and the kind of autism that made it very difficult for him to speak. Although he had a language that we learned and we could communicate with him, but it took many, many years to be able to do that. And the book is about his life and my life with him. And this particular scene is when Charlie has finally left the institution. He was in an institution for 8 years, and he's home. And he and my youngest brother, our younger brother, they're washing their hands for dinner. It's called Two Brothers Washing for Dinner. As the house filled with less and less light, I used to watch them at the sink, their sleeves rolled up ceremoniously. My 2 brothers washing for dinner. Chattering, the youngest turned the faucet for his older brother, who leaned hesitantly forward, reached for soap, then stopped, hands motionless as if they were sculpted mid-air. He was our slow, awkward brother, the one we tried to understand his whole life. He waited for guidance, first warm water, then soap up to the elbows. The youngest knew his brother, could not talk back and never would, but when he unfurled a white towel and took his brother's arms to dry, he marveled at their reach, higher, more beyond than his own. His brother's deep, mature muscles and shoulder blades cutting their long curves. Though he would dream of bearing his older brother like a gift to the world, for now he led him through the hallway of our house, not narrow or dark for long, but reaching an end where a table was set and the candles were burning. Thank you. I jumped ahead a bit, but I'm just going to go ahead to my last piece here, which is a prose poem again, and it really is in honor of the people who took care of Charlie at the group home where he lived on Paseo Boulevard. Marvelous, marvelous care. Incredible people who took him bowling. He was a great bowler. just, did all kinds of just fun art things, and just daily living things that were just so important. And it made him feel as if he were part of a community. I have my whole life to thank to them. So this one is located on Paseo Boulevard in Kansas City, where he had lived. It's called Rooms on Paseo Boulevard. One morning, I saw where they slept, under plaid or flowered coverlets, one bed beside the other, deep within the rooms of the old house on Paseo. Their towels hung on a rack by the sink, each man's name inked at the edge. I could see how their white sheets whipped in the air as their beds were made, as if the men who had slept in them were honored guests, for they were each day honored, born in their dignity by the care of someone who loved them, these young men growing to middle age and beyond. Their clothes were silently laundered and ironed on the ironing board set up in the kitchen. Even the blue jeans and pajamas were laid out delicately for picking up again, for putting on the body, for filling the imagination with the purpose of the day. These honored men, only half known, miracles of our incomplete understanding of what we expect in men. That heavy log settled in our eye, for don't they open their arms each day, all color and sound speeding to embrace them? My brother, one among them, rising from his bed, his cradle and beginning, entered an orbit of his own in the company of these brothers, far from their families. In these rooms, my brother's many lives were woven, a wrinkled and soon-to-be ironed cloth, shadows and glints in the folds, a resonance become elemental, almost light, fixed yet fluid. My brother, his brothers, all of a time, and a house filled with rooms on Paseo Boulevard. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for getting us started, and thank you for reading across your books over the course of time. It's so nice to hear that movement. And now you can say that Shakespeare opened for you, so that's something that you can take home with you for free. Our next poet this evening is Melody G. Her first book of poetry, Each Crumbling House, was published by Perugia Press in 2010. Her other books are The Dead in Daylight and The Convert's Heart is Good to Eat. Melody's work has received support from the Sustainable Arts Foundation, the Regional Arts Commission of St. Louis, and Kundaman. A former English professor, Melody now works in communications and marketing and lives with her family right here in St. Louis, Missouri. Her first collection of memoir essays is forthcoming from the University of Iowa Press. Melody, please.
Thank you so much, Kenneth. Thank you all for being here. It's wonderful to see you. Thank you for coming out. Thank you especially to you, Kenneth, for hosting this whole series with so much care and love for poetry. My Perugia book is called Each Crumbling House, and the poems I'll share from here kind of help me tell the story of how I put this book together, because everything I learned about that, I learned with my editor at Perugia. And so the first one I'll share is actually the original title poem of the book that my editor asked me to change. And she said, I need to see a title poem. And I was like, this poem is about my voice, and it's about me trying to reconcile telling my family stories in English and where my voice fits with theirs and where theirs fits with mine. And she was like, yeah, I can't see that. And I'll read that one for you first. It's called The Voice Before. Echoes uncurl down a canyon like patient honey rolling. Rocks repeat everything I say. A tree falls as many times as I can hear it. My body in shadows, misshapen echoes of light thrown through cedars and ivory birch. You are the body in my throat, pitched into this vein of earth, pierced on tentacles of aloe and gummed in their heat-split stalks. What was the voice before the voice released? The unheard body, the naked, shivering idea of sound? What are you now climbing back toward my mouth out of the canyons, surrounding me with screams of torn shrub and shale, a body broken whole from my teeth? I would lay out the valley of my tongue, my throat for you, but you do not want return as I do. You have grown too thin in the shape of air for a body, for me to say what you have taken. The first sound was an emptying, the first return, departure. So she was right and asked me to maybe pick a different poem, and I did, and I got this beautiful cover out of it because houses are a lot easier to draw and to see on a cover than a voice. And I loved that her advice was the title of a book has to be something you can see or be drawn toward or hold in your mind. And so I learned that putting a book together isn't just about what you think your core theme is, but it's about what the reader's going to connect with too. So this one is called Each Crumbling House. It takes place in China on a trip I took with my mom back to the village where she was born. Guangdong, China, 2001. Your mythology of memory forgets and lies. Memory makes ghosts grow shadows. We stand where your brother, in sleeves of blood, slaughtered the oldest water buffalo. Sweat stabs his eyes, and he looks as though he mourns the beast. When you tell, you hold history between your teeth, ready to swallow. And here, your mother shed her jewelry for a small man to smuggle you both to Hong Kong. She gives him everything, then touches the jade sewn into her shirt. The stone beats fast against her finger. I knew every telling before we came to Guangdong, have for so long braced them in the scaffolding of my voice. If you could see them now, each crumbling house I have already rebuilt. So I'll just read for you the first and last poem in this collection, because they kind of help me, or help the book show that my position in this book is that of a daughter, and my concern is that position and those relationships and my inheritance. Migration. After the rain, trees burn with monarchs, come this winter on dust and paper bodies. Some of the dead cling to trash on the road, frames of wings like frames of broken windows. You say you never saw anything like them in China, though you cannot say for sure. As a girl, you leashed crickets with ox hairs and baited bees with sweet tomato flesh. But nothing like this, you say, like this orange. This monarch generation lives 3 times longer than its parents, than it would without a migration to complete. They are given time to break their bodies over mountains and heave themselves onto warm trees so they all might survive. Are you wondering how much more time you have been given to learn a language and forget a language, to break your body over an ocean for this pale redwood dusk and this daughter? I know you were not drawn here to save yourself, and so I cannot tell you that I have nothing to save, nothing that waits for me to be drawn, nothing that says, you must break your wings for this. And this last one is called What You Remember. It's from that same trip, Kowloon, Hong Kong, 2001. In the cramped city, we bargain with our clumsy Hong Kong Cantonese. You do not tell me the names of streets or the best places to eat. You do not remember the sound of tide at the wall of the city. All you have told me of Hong Kong is that once you lived here. What you remember most is leaving. On our last day in Kowloon, we share a plate of wine-soaked chicken and greens in the hotel cafe. Our bags bulge with the sweet, sticky lychees we have become addicted to, and gifts for the children in your village. Tomorrow we will give them away and touch hands in the exchange. I will not remember how to say the simplest words to them. You will remind me that I, too, speak Cantonese like a child, and you only a little better. The words you have not forgotten: China, revolution, ocean, daughter. So by the time I put together my second collection, which is called The Dead in Daylight, I kind of knew how to position myself in a book. And I knew that I had gone from being a daughter to being a mother. My 2 girls were born during the writing of this book. But daughterhood is not an easy thing to shake. And so there's still a lot of that in here. I'll start with the title poem, The Dead in Daylight. Dreams and the dead are for daylight. If, in the dark, a dream tries to walk through my mouth, I bite it back. If the dream escapes, it will grow legs and strangle me. If the dead open my eyes, I lead them outside by the hand, where my mother exiles snakes of incense ash, rotted ancestor fruit, and clipped hair. In mourning before a funeral, do not walk through anyone's door. Do not curse a good home with your white armband. We build no houses for the dead, so they come lie with me, staining me with inky breath. When my mother asks why I am crying, I tell her a bad dream. The moonlight brightens her dread. In the darkness, I speak dark things, so she hurries from my room. On a holiday, do not sweep. Do not bathe. Do not extinguish your porch light. Let the fortune see you and cling to your oily head. We bow and cajole. We keep arm's length and spirits sedated. In the morning, palm shadows still look like a wide wind chime of blades. My mother sees night clinging to me. Mogong, do not talk. We eat instead. A bowl of rice noodles and scrap meat. She chews and chews. Do not buy a house at the mouth of a street. The mouth will open and swallow all your neighbor's misfortune. Her fear commands, be invisible to disaster. I hide well from the dead and the living, who are everywhere too. I skip my baths and the layers rise, grease and sweat mudded with every speck of luck my stink lures. Before leaving home, I show the dead my dream of stones abrading the grime of fortune's bait to exhume a visible shine. This next one is about these trips my mom takes to China. And after our big trip together, she went back, but she went back on these big tours, like with the fanny packs and the hats and the flags. And there's something about grief that she's trying to go home, but is going home in this way. Why we are this way. Because my mother cannot remember the churn of revolution around her, because she could never, even after 6 trips to China, find her father's ghost, she brought me there to help her look. Because she could not bring a child from herself, she brought one across the ocean, and we are both immigrants now. Because she needed a child without memory of blood or hunger, she bought too much milk, only to realize a baby needs formula, only to try to save the milk by freezing it, only to have it thaw and separate like overcooked meat from its bone. Because I never felt the sea beneath me, because I was not carried across its back, but hurled in jet stream, because I was not running, I was arriving, she didn't know what to say when we first met. Because in every dream, she is a forest of doors, batting against a forest of hinges, and in every dream, I am every wave, shouting endlessly that I too have an old taste of salt, my eyes ablaze and my tongue rotten with it. Because she came with her own mother, now immigration is the only thing she knows of mothers and daughters. Because in China, again this summer, she takes the flashy bus tours and stays in the most Western hotels, because in a name tag and hat, she can return and never return to where she was born, where she should not have to quarry the ruins of her mother tongue just to speak to strangers. Because now my hips are crooked, My belly soft and rippled from the girl I carried. I have done yet another thing she could never. Because I speak and she speaks, and neither can listen in the other's language or silence our own. Because without words, what would we then have to know? And then I'll end with a few from my chapbook that came out in 2022. And the voice of this is of a convert. It's called The Convert's Heart is Good to Eat. And it's about my religious conversion in 2016. The convert learns to play hide and seek. The convert hid within her grandfather's restaurant while her cousin hunted, while their mothers fried in oil and sweet and sour. When the convert's parents laid eyes on her, they said, "Daughter, daughter." They never played this game with her because from daughter there is no hiding. When the Lord walked in the garden, calling the pair from the trees, a game began. Now the convert strains to find him, fingering her ripped places, stalking him out of his relentless camouflage. The theologian says, there is no faith without separation. A ship will sink under its own lighthouse. Now the convert's daughter is hiding from her. The girl knows being found is the part you wait for, but is not the best part. Tucked behind the restaurant's lard buckets, the convert hears the boy flushing the usual traps and dark passages. She enters a country where she thinks she can live. The writer says waiting is etymologically related to vigor, to vigilance. The convert seeks with bellows and stomps. Her daughter's laugh reveals her place every time. Who can keep from saying, "Here I am"? This next one is called The Convert Wants Wounds, Not Scars. And it is about my thinking about the crucifixion because I have a cold sore. The convert wants wounds, not scars. The wound on her lip goes white before returning red. The virus erupts the line between chin and lip, between lip and philtrum. A sore across 2 continents of skin, a bridge of lava. She will feel healed when the flesh color returns. The variation is the aberration. Blood courses to deliver a clot. Vessels bouquet under the scalp or in the womb, in places where we heal fastest. Over the wound, cells scramble, a lean-to scab, a mortar of new skin. The body wants to draw its seams together. But Jesus hangs before the convert, eternally wounded, eternally weeping from his gashes. How to open hers without nails or thorns? How to measure heartbeats without seeing blood heave out its rhythms? A gush slows under pressure, even as the pulse goes on. Our lesions take air, our infections seek sunlight. How to resist our unwilled mechanisms to staunch. We push through the same tear in the world and leave it sore. When we come open. Pick a wound, slow to bleed and slower to seal. We cream the scar to fade our atlas of living, what itched its way to a silver road, what shadow constellation of pox. The convert counts Jesus' wounds. If you count both hands and both feet, all lashes and piercings and the forsaken cry, the number is higher and lower than anyone's. And this is the last one I'll share with you. The poem is a series of questions, and it's called Questions for an Immigrant's Child. What does this mean? How do you say this? But what does it mean? How can you go? What do you owe for this life? How do you write this? How do you have so much? How has it not made you less selfish? How do you talk to us like that? Do I say it this way? How does a map work? How do I tell time? How come you don't taste as you cook? How do you know anything is good? How come you go? Do you like to make me worry? Why not wait? How do you say what you think all the time? All these words, how come you don't call? What number is this? How many in a pound? Why are these so expensive? Why do you have to talk so fast? You hear me? You listening? What else could I do? Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. I've learned so much about my own practice, and the idea of needing to see or hold a title poem is something I am taking with me. Our third reader for the evening, Carolina Hotchandani, is a Latinx South Asian poet born in Brazil and raised in various parts of the United States. Her debut poetry collection, The Book Eaters, won the 2023 Perugia Press Prize and was released in September of last year. Hotchandani holds degrees from Brown, Texas State, and Northwestern universities. Her honors include scholarships from the Breadloaf Writers Conference, Rana Jaffe Foundation, Community of Writers, Tin House Writers Workshop, and Napa Valley Writers Conference. Her poetry has appeared in Agni, Alaska Quarterly Review, Beloit Poetry Journal, Blackbird, Cincinnati Review, Missouri Review, Prairie Schooner, and other journals. She is a Goodrich Assistant Professor of English in Omaha, Nebraska, where she lives with her husband and daughter. Please welcome Carolina Hotchandani.
Thanks so much for coming, and thank you to everyone at the St. Louis Poetry Center for hosting this event, and to the my Perugia Press sisters. We do call our pressmates sisters, and it's just such a wonderful, warm community that has been formed around our press. So thank you all. So I'm going to be reading from my book, The Book Eaters. Can everyone hear me already? I started writing it in 2016, which was when my daughter was 1.5 and was starting to enter into sentences. And around that same time, my father was kind of going through the opposite sort of development, falling out of sentences and out of memory and out of the identity that I had known to be his. So yeah, seeing that intersection inspired a lot of just thinking about language and needing to write poetry about the loss of language. But I'll start with a poem that I think is sort of like an overview of my life that has involved just a lot of moving. And ironically, in 2016, this was when we settled in Omaha, and I've lived in Omaha for longer than any of the other places that I've lived, so 8 years. That's the max. But this is sort of looking backward at all of the moving. And this is called The Boxes. We move. We move every few years. What's made of glass, we wrap in newspaper, boxing memories that, for others, live in hometowns. Their memories are perennials, sprouting thoughts of years before, when holes were dug, when kids couldn't decide between irises and alliums. Then the irises won, peddling memories of arguments, reconciliations, purpling that summer. We move in trucks, in boxes, our contents 4 continents, and who knows how many cities, rooms, drawers. How many corners of us are emptied in the new town, free of the objects left at the last town's goodwill. We miss the goodwill of old friends. Memories stretch from the last place, the way I reached for an apple at the old grocery store, the whole pyramid of them toppling over, bruised, rolling. Memories of things falling do not exist in neat arrangements on display tables. They do not gleam on the waxed skins of red delicious apples, assembled in the same spot, in the same store we'd visit for years. We don't have the years. We store the store, our memories rolling to the next town, where some sense of not belonging lives under my hot cheeks as I overhear a girl tell another girl, the eyebrows of the new girl are like the tail of a squirrel. I hear the giggles. I feel the apples, bruised, rolling through my body, which is no grocery store. The floor of me does not shine. I am not lit with bright lights. I am the boxes we take to the next place, which tear and are taped. When my father starts to forget, I understand. The places never held us. We hold the places. We move. The next poem, the U, refers to my father, who was born in pre-partition India in the part that is now Pakistan. And when he was 8, and when India gained independence from British rule, his family migrated southward to what's now India. And so as I was growing up, my father always talked a lot with my brothers and my brother and me about this journey, and often like lecturing us about history and religion. And we were often like not the most voluntary audiences listening to him, but so this kind of like gets into that dynamic. This is called Partition. In your version of the story, people butter their fingers with notions of God, splitting India into a smaller India, a new Pakistan. The way a single roti's dough is pulled apart, the news spheres rolled in the palms, then flattened. The idea of God, the destroyer of human bonds, you will say. The reason for new borders, new pain to sprout on either side of a dividing line. You'll go on. I'll picture the edges of your words blurring to a hum as I think of how to wrest your rant from you. A rolling pin barrels over dough, widens the soft disc, makes it fine. You are fragile, like a story that stretches belief, like a nation, like a thin disc of dough that sticks to a surface, tearing when it's peeled back. I don't know how to part the story from the person and keep the person. The next poem that I'll read is it's a little too sweet, and it's one that I hesitated putting into the book for that reason. And yet I feel like if you have this sort of story as part of your family's history, how could you not tell it? So here it is. Author unknown. There's a story that rolls daily over the streets of my father's mind. It's asphalt enameled with rain. As a bus treads through a puddle that fights gravity, as the bus halts and hisses, wets my father's shirt. Doors part. He steps in, unaware the bus carries the woman he'll marry, my mother. A light turns green, the story accelerates, jostling the strangers inside, till the bus jolts to a stop, a passenger's flung onto my father's lap. My mother smiles. A conversation starts. Neither of them is meant to be in Rio that day. Today, my father quotes Newton as he narrates this tale. Inertia made that passenger fall, as motion always wants to stay in motion. But who graved the skies? Who made the rain percuss Rio's rooftops like an amateur drummer so no one could go on foot that day? I want to know who authored the story driven by the bus that set us in motion, my family on its course. My parents did meet on a bus in Rio on a day when it was raining and when neither of them was meant to be there, and they were always, they always loved to tell that story of their meeting. A little water. The rain comes down and prompts the world's thrumming. Outside, leaves escape their trees, pasting themselves on windshields. Dislocated pieces of the world skim the sidewalks, lawns. A paper bag hooked on the wind's hooks reels above the grass. Memories float up against the downpour like leaves from my father's reused tea bags. My childhood browns the cup. When you were in France for 1 year, my father says, and I correct him. I was in England, not in France. Do you remember the tea I brought back for you? And oh yes, he then recalls or finds his faith in the story I tell. I offer it to him, my past, a gift of tea, a souvenir from a place not here. Muddy water trickles in through cracks in the basement floor, forming tributaries that join at a point, so a river flows through my home. I think of the English Channel, how some people swim across it from France to England. What difference does a little water make? A cord to bind us. Was it not then, as I saw the future embodied in the body of my child, I sought a story to tether us together, my daughter, myself, a story too to tie the mother me to the one I was before I birthed her. The cord had been severed. Then I heard a woman ask, "Is that white baby yours?" As if all I was not white, as if all my daughter was white, as if I were a brown wet nurse feeding the baby the only white drops of me. Self-portrait as a woman's intention to write. Once she gives birth, once the feeding's over, once the baby sleeps, once the crying stops, once the clothes are clean, once the piles are folded, once her old clothes fit, once the mind is clear, once the baby babbles, once intention buds, once fatigue fades, once the new day starts, once her body's hers, once the toddler speaks, once an hour cracks open, once the words surround her, once a poem grips her, once the child's at school, once the woman's cry is louder than the child's. This is my daughter's favorite poem in the book. It's called Small Green Bowl. She's 9 now, and so she understands this one. At 18 months, my daughter says, "Do you want more?" When she wants more grapes, more blueberries, more cubes of cheese to fill her small green plastic bowl. Do you want to get up? Do you want to go out? Do you want to listen to that song again? These are the questions I ask her, which she repeats. No I comes to fill the small green plastic bowl. Mama speaks of herself as Mama, and Mama's child is always you. As you learn to search yourself for the small green plastic bowl, I find an I, as do you. We fill the bowl together with cold berries. This will be the last poem that I read from this book, and then I'll just read the new poem. Blueprints. I helped my father build a memory palace where I hope to be an integral part of its design, the pillar that keeps the structure from collapse. We talk of places he can still call up in his mind. The house in Hyderabad where he was born, a train station in Agra where he left his youth behind. I follow him into a Bombay movie theater, whirring fans chill the cinema's air. A black and white film pulls him in, offers succor from the orange heat of June. Outside, a salesman sells overripe mangoes from a bicycle cart. Shoeless children ask tourists for money. A monkey clambers across a power line. I have never been to India, my father's motherland. It is tricky to make myself a vital figure there, a place I've never been, a time before I exist. I insist I can be airbrushed in. Make me a child beside a monkey, tightrope walking on the power line. That monkey you still remember. And this one is a light one to end on. I've often wondered if I would ever be able to write a poem about grading papers. But I do a lot of grading papers, and it would be just unfortunate if all of that led to no poetic material. So I challenged myself, and I'm actually pleased with this poem. Anyway, it's called Vicarious. A goat bleats under the bamboo house in my student's essay. There is a space between her house and the ground where the family of goats resides. Through gaps between the floor planks, the goats stutter into her dreams. She knows the grunt of a mother goat laboring, the squeal of the newborns, their suckling mouths, the narrow apertures don't let her see. She knows their hunger like her brothers, its invisible strings pulling their mother to him to nurse in the next room. There is a space between the essay I read and the margins where, in blue ink, I place my wonder. This is so beautiful, I write. I draw blue asterisks beside sentences that flood my senses. The stars bring me back like crocuses opening through snow. In the peripheries, I mark myself being marked by my student. I set down a grade, an A, stamp of my evaluative power. Between that family of goats and myself, there are oceans, continents. Between the typed page and me, envy. I cannot write about goats I've never known. I know I should not steal the goats. Nothing is worse than a goat thief. Thank you again.
Melody and Catherine, we come back up. And as always, this is the time for awkward jokes if you have them. I wish you had noticed how large Carolina's eyes got when I handed her the microphone. So I think I should probably start with her. But we'll start very generally. So very intentionally, we wanted to celebrate small presses, right, with this lineup of fantastic poets, specifically Perugia. So I'll ask, and all jokes aside, I wanted to begin with you, Carolina, because when we were kind of talking about what we wanted to discuss this evening and beginning with Perugia and y'all's experiences with Perugia, you had said specifically that you think Perugia is a bit unique in the landscape of smaller presses. So I was just wondering if you could begin by elaborating on that.
Yes, well, I feel like I've heard from people who have their books published both in large presses and in small presses that the experience can often be of like feeling like you're getting lost, either in the small press because there aren't enough resources, or in the bigger press because you're just one of many writers that you know the editors have to think about. And I think that I think that that's really not the case with Perugia, since they do put out only one book per year, which is the book that wins their Perugia Press Prize. I feel they're very committed to the quality of the book and just the integrity of that process, and like, you know, if they don't have resources for more, they won't grow, because I think it's the whole point is to it's about securing the quality of the book. So and I really felt that, like, Rebecca Olander, the editor, she just pours her heart and soul into the editorial process. And yeah, I absolutely, I felt like I was the center of her universe. And I mean, I think that that's really rare. I felt it, that it was a gift, not that it was not that I was entitled to that, but that it was rare.
Yeah,
Sure. I know, I was just thinking if there could be an Academy Award for book editors, it would be Rebecca Olander would receive it. She's just a powerhouse, a superwoman. And she is able to connect to people very personally and kind of bring people together. And so, I mean, she's always proven that. I had the experience of working with Susan Can, who was the founder of Perugia, and she was phenomenal too. I mean, just so dedicated and sincere, and as you know, Melody said, really very concerned about, you know, details, great and small. And she did have a sense of a whole book and the reflection of that book, you know, in the cover and the title. She thought of all corners of it. So yes, we can't praise her enough, I think. So Melody,
I've never published with the big press, so I can't say the difference. But I will say that one thing that Perugia did that was different than the other two wonderful presses that I love is that they developed a relationship with their writers. Writers are invited to become readers for the next year's contest, and the next year's however long you want to participate with that. They're invited to do readings and performances, to collaborate together. And so that relationship really matters. I feel like I belong to this press in a very particular and special way. And I also felt really challenged by my editor. I think she looked at my manuscript and thought, there's a great book in here. And I feel like the other editors that I've worked with, and it was really pleasing to hear, were like, this is ready, let's go with it. And I was really happy about that. It felt good, like, it's ready. I did a great job all on my own. But the Perugia editor said, there's something that you can achieve that you haven't seen yet, and we're going to work together to accomplish that. And that was really wonderful. And I feel like the strongest of the books because of that.
I really love that. I want to move kind of from the most macro question possible and move kind of slowly more and more micro. So the next micro level I want to get to is just that kind of, once the book is accepted and you're working with that editor through that process, what different skills, what different lenses do you have to use and kind of shift away from being a poet alone at your writing desk to actually moving a book through that process with that editor. What does that, I mean, I would imagine there are many of us in this room who are not familiar with that process. So what does it feel like? Again, and back to what different skill sets and what different perspective do you have to take on the work as you're moving through that process? I'll open that up to anybody to bite.
Go ahead, you've done this most recently.
I just don't know if I'm the best person to start, just because I did a lot of editing before the book got to, so the structure of the book, the ordering, a lot of that was there. And I think that, I mean, the thing that changed, this is just this, I'm gonna tell a story, but this is not like really answering your question. Yeah, I mean, so my book, I finished it October 15th, 2022. And then my father passed away the day after that. And I had sent this manuscript out to different places. And so I was happy with it. I saw it as finished. But then suddenly there was this event that happened, and then my father's a huge figure in this book. And so it was just like the way in which the book felt like it no longer represented my life. Like I had to just contend with that. And then when it got accepted, I had this like nagging feeling about the book, because I'm looking at it through the eyes now of like a woman who's lost her father, not the woman who was like tracing his journey on this earth, right? And so it was like, how do I edit death into the manuscript, and do I do that, right? And I mean, I was like a really scary question to ask myself of this book that I had so carefully put together, but it was sort of haunting me, and so I talked with Becky about that, Rebecca Olander, I call her Becky, but she was like, well, it's up to you, but it is finished as it is. And so it was like thinking about that and thinking about adding certain poems in that take place after his death. I did feel like having those poems in like gave the book a kind of closure and completeness that it didn't have, even though I had felt that it was finished. And so just that was quite an unusual experience, and I don't think that goes to what you're saying, but yeah.
I had a lot of editing done to my book, and it was wonderful. And I had to let go of my vision of the book. It turned out very differently than I had put it together. And I had to trust that this editor who had read it so carefully, and this team who had read it so carefully, knew what it could be in ways that I didn't. It was like, now that I have children, it feels like having someone else co-parent with me that I'd never met before, and having a say in how they're gonna turn out. So I think a skill to answer your question, Kenneth, is stepping back and allowing it to be seen in a completely different way, allowing it to have a new identity from a new reader who sees something else in it, who sees a different organization and sees different poems being edited, sees different titles for your poems, because it's fresh. This book was 10 years of poems too, so I was kind of locked into them in a way that breaking out of was wonderful too. So I hope that answers.
Sure.
Oh, I just to add, I think what she said about freshness, I think that's really important, because for me too, the book was, written over so many years, and I had these fixed ideas about what the poems were and how they were, being communicated. But when Susan Can, who was my editor at the time, was able to come up with, a different order for a couple of at least the first section, and gave me advice, in fact, on one poem's lineage. She encouraged me to set it up into tercets rather than all, all down the line, the way I usually write. And so that felt very innovative. And she also helped me with the title too, which I would be embarrassed to tell you what I first titled the manuscript. Oh my gosh, it's such a crazy, oh, that's true, you did. I think one of the working titles was Childish Nights. Isn't that winning? So it does take, it takes a couple of heads, put together. So.
I'm totally stealing Childish Nights, by the way. So you all have already started to, and by the way, no apologies if the answer you give is the answer we need for this evening, so it's all good. So you've already started to answer kind of my next kind of micro question down, which is more about putting together the poems themselves into a manuscript that somehow makes sense. And again, so here's where I get selfish. I'm very curious because I'm at that stage in my own life right now. And it just feels like there are a million different ways to put together this mixtape that I'm putting together for my girlfriend or whatever it is, right? And you gotta get it right. You can't jump out the gate too strong, right? You have to know where to put the ballad. You have to know how to connect one to the other. You have to know how to mix them right. I remember handing off the collection that was kind of becoming my manuscript last fall to several folks who I trusted, and almost without exception, they were like, have you considered these different sections you might create? And I was like, sections? Oh my God, no. I never even thought about that. So I would love to kind of hear how you move from this body of poems that I've been producing that are now beginning to talk to one another in some way, to making sense of them together as a manuscript, to then they're a finished product as a book.
Well, I think it depends on what you're aiming for. But I mean, if you're trying to, capture a certain tone of voice or, something related to experience. I mean, for me, it seems like in most collections, I start out in a more familiar place and go out into the world. And so what I've done is this really crazy thing, and this is probably just at the beginning, is I just sit down with each poem and I decide, is this innocence or is this experience? Kind of a William Blake thing. And that kind of helps me just get a little bit of guidance, especially the first run through. So.
I have a lot to say about this. So when I started writing, I was writing about new motherhood. And then I think when my daughter was like 6 months old, that's when my father had this heart surgery. And then shortly after that, he started to lose his memory. But so I started then writing these poems about memory loss. And so for a while I was thinking, like, are these two separate manuscripts, or can they be put together, or, and so at one point I wrote a poem about nursing and reading, and I was just like, I was comparing myself like to a book that was being consumed by insects. Meaning that I found the experience of being like the food source of another human being a little bit alienating. It wasn't like how I saw myself. I saw myself as a container of ideas, and suddenly I was this, food source for another person. And so I was just thinking of this, like, I'm like this book. It was meant to be read, but it's being eaten by these bugs. And so it was just, yeah, I know, it's bizarre. But anyway, when I wrote this poem, which is the title poem, The Book Eaters, I suddenly was like, oh, that could be like a central metaphor in my book, because it could connect this experience of like shifting identity through new motherhood to losing one's memory. And it's kind of like this withering archive, like my father losing memories, losing historical memory. And so that was really an important moment, is like figuring out conceptually, there's like shifts in identity that like tie all the poems together. But I also wanted like something concrete, like an image for that concept. And so that is woven through the book. But then, like, when I was figuring out order and like sections and all of that, like I kind of wanted for the reader to feel as though there's some sort of chronology to the book, even though the book is actually not in chronological order. Like, it's like there is a sense of chronology. There's a sense that you are, going through a plot that's unfolding in time, poem by poem. So I wanted a little bit of that feeling, but I also was thinking in terms of like an argument, like, okay, section 1 is about my father's memory loss. Section 2 is about me shifting my identity significantly. So it's like section 3, then it was kind of like, okay, so if there are these like 2 ways in which you change so dramatically in one lifetime, like what is identity then? So sort of taking up that philosophical question sort of head on, that happens a little bit more in the 3rd section, as well as some like poems that are grounded in experience so that the reader's not just like feeling like they're in some sort of philosophical essay. But I kind of wanted both the kind of argument structure and the chronology. And it took me, 7 years to write the book because I was like obsessed with trying to figure out how to structure it. But yeah, so.
I'll just share one piece of advice that I received at the Kundaman retreat. This fellow writer was looking at my manuscript and said, you're writing in chapters. Your mother poems are here, your husband poems are here, your outside poems are here, and you're trying to write this in chapters, and it's not working because it feels really blocky. And she said, try to make and she was talking about chronology too, and said, try to lead the reader through waves and bring them up to an emotional point and then down and then up again and then down again. And if you find there's a poem that gets them really high, that's maybe an indication that that's a section ender, and to just think of the flow and where you're leading a reader. And I think that's sometimes what writers forget about. We write without an audience in mind so much. We write for ourselves, we write all of this depth that we're feeling, and not think about what's the reader experiencing. So that's the best advice about putting a disparate bunch of poems together into what feels like a book, what feels like a collection, is the reader's experience of peaks and valleys.
Yeah, I love that. I'll have to ask you another time about, because then my thought is, okay, so I'm putting together this chronology or this argument, right? And I realize like, oh, sections 1, 2, and 3 are working well, but or I want to move the reader into this emotional peak, but like I might be 2 or 3 poems short of that, right? That's where, and now I'm like, ugh, there goes another couple months, right? So anyway, another day. I want to spring into another question simply because Melody, we're kind of working from a document together to come up with some questions tonight. You commented on it and said you really liked it, so I'm going to ask it. And if you've been to more than one of these, hopefully at some point you've heard me say that one of the best things to happen to my writing life when I was much younger was to take a sculpture class. So I have the opportunity to say thank you, Arnie Nadler, for one of the best things to happen to my writing life when I was a teeny tiny person of 20, whatever I was. What activity or other aspect of your life is seemingly completely unrelated to poetry, but would make your writing life fall apart if you gave it up? For me, that is always trying my hand, even if it's awful, at other kinds of art. I'm starting a drawing class tomorrow. I have no idea what to expect. It's with a bunch of other grown-ups, like in the evening. I'm gonna come sweaty from the gym, but I'm gonna be there. And hopefully it will inform my writing in some weird ways. So I'm curious about what practices you all have.
Okay, well, I draw from nature, and I've drawn my whole life. I don't know if I've done very well, but I enjoy it. I mean, I just love the way your mind can kind of just, go beyond the walls and just imagine and dream. And in poetry, I'm doing that, but not in the same way. So that is a great release, and I love learning about nature. So I've started nature journals, and I'm kind of focused on just pencil color pencil and graphite. I used to work a bit in watercolor, and a long time ago I worked in oil, which is the cover of my memoir right there. I did that painting of my brother. But I've, gotten away from oil, but I really could not give up drawing, especially drawing birds and flowers and landscapes, so.
I think just going on walks or jogging, like, I find it really, I feel like I think through what I'm writing about, like during those times. And for some reason, I don't feel that when I'm driving. I don't know why. I mean, it must just be like the movement of your body and not having like a destination, like if I'm driving, I'm gonna pick my daughter up from school or whatever, I'm just like focused on that next thing. And so there's something about like, okay, I'm gonna go on this like hour-long walk, and it's not about the destination, and I'm just sort of mulling things over. I find that that sort of time to be really important.
So I go to mass, and I wish I had like a romantic answer about what I do, but I go to mass, and sometimes it's the liturgy, it's the beauty of the music and the liturgy, but mostly it's because being there makes me feel really small. And I feel like that's the posture that I need to feed my writing. I need to be somewhere that makes me feel awe and communal. I can't remember the phrase, communal effervescence with other people, but mostly it's the smallness and looking at myself as receiving. And I think that's it. But I do love that question and thinking about the parts of our lives that feel unrelated, but that feed us too. Thank you for asking.
All right, we are going to, I'm gonna ask these poets to answer one more question, and then we're gonna close up. This is my usual thievery from Al Filreis, another community poetry creator who asks folks who are guests on his podcast to gather paradise, thank you. So I'm gonna ask these folks to think about something that they have recently read, seen, experienced. It could be in the poetry world or not, that is just really ringing your bell and really inspiring you in terms of something artistic. I wish I had something new to say, but I read so dadgum slowly that I will repeat again. I can't say enough good things about Kaveh Akbar's new novel, Martyr. Strongly recommend. I will also say I came across in a little free library Willa Cather, who I'd never read before. Has some just incredibly gorgeous short stories that some of them don't really go anywhere, and that's really cool. So, Willa Cather.
Thank you, Ken. Oh boy. This is what I get for sitting next to the MC here. I will say that I have really fallen for a poet, Paisley Rekdal. Yeah, you guys know her. She has an amazing multimedia website where her latest book is called West in Translation. And if you just Google Paisley Rekdal, you get right to her website, and the last name is Rekdal, and Paisley's like Paisley. And this book really takes a viewer through the experience of the Transcontinental Railroad. And it's really a commemorative piece of the anniversary of the Chinese immigrants who built that railroad. And what she has is a poem that was written on the walls of Angel Island, the detention center in the Bay, San Francisco Bay, that really, is a heartfelt cry of the heart of a detainee. And she's taken that poem and had it translated, because she's not, she's of Chinese heritage, but she doesn't speak Chinese, and she had it translated. And every character is a video or another poem itself. And it's just remarkable. And I'm just so excited to see poetry portrayed that way. I mean, there's so many different ways to experience poetry. We so many ways. And this was a newer one that came across my dashboard. And I just love the concept, I love the idea, and I love what she's trying to do with the art. And what another thing she's doing too is to letting it just fade away, like not thinking of it as permanent. I mean, so many of us want our poems to exceed shelf life, I mean, we all do, but her idea is just have a poem, a site that's just like nature itself, in which it is experienced in time and then it fades away. And I think that's, just astonishing. So thank you for that question.
I love that book as well. I keep reading and rereading Alice Oswald's Nobody. I just love the rhythms of it. And it's almost like I love it too much, which is, so I just I'll read it and then be like, okay, I'm just gonna put it away now. and then I come back to it. Yeah, I love that book.
This is a shameless plug, and it's true, but our newest Perugia sister is Joan Kwan Glass, and her book is coming out this year, and it's remarkable. And she is a biracial Korean-American poet, and she writes about motherhood, and she writes about race and identity and culture, and I can't wait for you to read her book. Her name is Joan Kwan Glass, and she's, what's the phrase, Kenneth? She's a paradise that you're asking us for?
Gathering paradise.
Gathering paradise. You'll get it with her collection.
Love it. Thank you very much. I would like to start us by closing and by asking you to help me appreciate these poets and their time. This evening. Just so you all know, we're going to take a summer break after this reading, so we will be back in August on the 27th right here. We are going to have, we're going to kind of continue a unintentional at this point theme around poetry community by having a couple folks from Babbler Poetry Society. I think Mark is in the house in the back there. He's going to be one of our poets, along with Melissa Qualls. It should be a really fantastic evening. I hope you can make it. Just a reminder that you can view tonight's reading after April 23rd. So check it out online, continue to share it, continue to comment. We want to build momentum, not just for the Poetry Center, but for these poets' work. So please help us spread the word. Again, thank you so much to Perugia Press and all of the labor that went on behind the scenes. As always, thank you to the poets. Thank you to Aaron and Eileen, who are my wizards behind the curtain, making sure that this thing goes smoothly. Thank you to you showing up in person on a chilly, rainy evening. Be safe going home. Take care.